Let us not forget everything that happens. It's by the will of Allah. Holy will. It's time to unite and stand, and we will be the best amongst men. It's not time to be extreme or duty unthinkable, but to stand together as one. Tune into Sunnahfollowers, streaming every day, various platforms. Trust me, you'll find a way. Sunnahfollowers.
The daughter of one of the enemies of Islam, she converted and became so devout in her worship of Allah that Allah revealed a whole surah of the Quran in regards to her. Join Ustada lailanasheeba as she details the story of Khulthum Bint Uqba. Radiyallahu anha. Wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulullah. I apologize for being late. I was trying to figure out something on the Zoom and I couldn't figure it out. But alhamdulillah, I want to welcome everybody to our series entitled The Heroines of Islam. And alhamdulillah, I really hope that you sisters are walking away from these stories realizing that Islam is a beautiful way of life perfected for us by Allah. Islam came about during the 5th, 6th century, and it brought rights to women that women never had. Women were viewed as nothing at all. You know, most people that, like I said, most of the people living on earth back in those decades, they would bury their daughters alive. They would allow a few of the girls to survive just to keep the population going. But other than that, a woman was of no value. But Islam came about and gave us women rights that we never had before. Islam came about and raised women up to the same status as men spiritually. However, we have different roles and responsibilities from them. But women are not animals. Women are not jinn. Women are not shaitan. Women are not invisible. Women are not cyclops. None of that stuff that you see even today in the year 2024, people still trying to take women down levels too. So there's no need for feminism. What's the cure for feminism? Islam. You know, once a woman converts to this beautiful way of life, she realizes that she has just the same chance of paradise as a man. She can live here on this earth and enjoy the good things here just like man can. You know, we just have different roles, different responsibilities. We need to know what those roles are, what those responsibilities are. And so tonight, the heroine that I'm going to speak about tonight, she made history too. Not only did she prove that women are not invisible, nor should they be. Not only did she prove that a woman's voice is not aura, that it's haram for a woman to speak or talk or be seen, but because of her and her dilemma, her struggle and journey towards Allah, this is when Allah sent down the verses of the Quran forbidding Muslim women from being with non-Muslim men. And the story that I'm going to go over today is a story of a woman named Khulthum Bint Uqba. She was the daughter of the enemy of Allah, the enemy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let me put the PowerPoint up on the screen, and I want you guys to sit back and learn and benefit from this wonderful female companion story. She will be amongst the women in paradise, just like all the other females I've talked about. All these women, this is a question that one of the little kids asked. All of the women that I've talked about, these were all original companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all of them will be in paradise. All of them will be in paradise. Okay, so let's put the PowerPoint up on the screen. Let me start with the Zoom room first. Okay, and now I can make it go to everyone here. Hold on. I know y'all see a black screen, but it's just temporary. Okay, here we go. Now, let me put the PowerPoint, make it larger. Okay. Okay, and the name of the woman today that we're going to speak about is Khulthum Bint Uqba. Let's talk about her and her journey towards Allah. Khulthum was a noble woman. She was a wealthy woman. She came from an aristocrat family of the Arabs. She was a bird who flew alone. Why? Because she believed in Allah, but her father and many of her relatives did not. So she had the fitra within her burning strong, burning brightly. But she was surrounded by people who were poisonous to her fitra. But alhamdulillah, she overcame that. And her father was Uqba ibn Abi al-Mu'ayt. And you guys have heard of him. He was amongst the sinful and evil men who waged war against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was with Abu Jahl. He was with Abu Lahab. And they all were trying to kill the Prophet, destroy his mission. Okay? And he was friends to all these leaders of disbelief and arrogance and transgression. He, just like Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab and Ubay ibn Khalaf, he oppressed, persecuted, and tortured the Muslims in Mecca for their belief in Allah. So that was her father. And also, this is the woman who is mentioned in the Quran. She's the woman who complained. She complained. She complained, and as a result of her complaint, Allah sent down a chapter of the Quran, and that chapter is named after her, the woman who complained. So again, this is more dalil, more evidence that nowhere does Islam say that because we're women, we can't speak. We can't speak publicly, because this woman spoke publicly to the point where Allah sent down a whole surah after her and named it after her. Okay? Nowhere does Islam say that because we're women, we're inferior and we have to be hidden in the background, because she was not hidden in the background like none of these other women were. They were all out there on the front line. They were on the front line with the men. And this woman has made history. So anyway, she was the daughter of Uqba, one of the enemies of Allah, the enemies of Islam. And just so you guys know, she converted to Islam in the beginning of it. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the call to Islam, remember the first person to embrace Islam was a woman. And that woman was Khadija, radiallahu anha, his wife. Okay, well, after Khadija embraced Islam, many women embraced it too. We talked about Hani, who was the Prophet's cousin, who was his first love. She embraced Islam too. Okay, Khulthum. So Khulthum, she embraced Islam right after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the call to prophethood, even though her father and the other leaders of the Quraysh were against her. And she ended up migrating from Mecca to Medina eventually, not in the beginning. She didn't migrate to from Mecca to Medina when the Prophet and the Muslims first left, but she came afterwards. But because of her and her complaints, that's when Allah sent down the following verses of the Quran, where Allah says, in the interpretation of the meaning, O you who believe, when believing women come to you as immigrants, examine them, because Allah knows best as to their belief. And if you are certain that they are true believers, then do not send them back to the unbelievers, because they are not lawful wives to the unbelievers, nor are the unbelievers lawful husbands for them. But give the unbelievers the money which they have spent as their dowry to them. And there will be no sin on you to marry them after you've paid their dowry to them. And likewise, do not hold the disbelieving women as wives and ask for the return of that which you have spent, and let them, the disbelievers, ask back for that which they have spent. So again, she was the reason that these verses came down. The verses of the Quran forbidding a Muslim woman to live with or be married to a non-Muslim man. And the reason I say live with, because we have a big innovation that's going on. It started in the year 2000, and it's been going on for 24 years. We have a lot of women converting to Islam, and they have been told by some numbskull that they can stay married to their kafir husbands, when this is a sacrilege. And this is your dalil, that it's a sacrilege. Okay? You can't once you convert to Islam, your marriage is null and void. It's over. You got to pack your bag immediately and get out. Immediately. You're no longer married. Return the dowry and move on. You can marry a Muslim man, but you cannot be with that kafir. But we got Muslim women who are astaghfirullah married to kafirs, and that's sad. It's a big sin. It's a horrific sin. Also, Allah sent down these verses too, where he says in the interpretation, the meaning, if any of your wives have left you for the unbelievers, or in other words, they apostated, then you went out for a military expedition against them, then pay from that war booty to those whose wives have left the equivalent of what they have spent on their dowry, and fear Allah on whom you believe. So you see, all these verses were sent down forbidding Muslim women from being with non-Muslim men, and for Muslim men sending them back to their kafir families. Also, this verse where Allah says in the interpretation of the meaning, O Prophet, when believing women come to you to give you the pledge of allegiance, And they pledge to you that they will not associate anything in worship with Allah, that they will not steal, that they will not commit illegal intercourse, that they will not kill their children, nor will they utter slander intentionally or lie intentionally. Then accept their pledge of allegiance and ask Allah to forgive them. All these verses were sent down because of this woman here, Khulthum, the daughter of Uqbah. And also this verse where Allah says in the interpretation, the meaning, "O you who believe, do not take as friends the people who incurred the wrath of Allah. Surely they have despaired in the hereafter." So all of these verses were sent down in regards to this one woman and her story and her struggle. So now let's take a look at the greatness of this female companion. Let's uncover who she was. And we're going to start at the beginning. Khulthum, may Allah be pleased with her. She was one of the few early converts to Islam in Mecca. So she was one of the very first Muslims. She was not even married, guys. Even though she was old enough to recognize the truth, she still was a virgin young woman. And unlike many of the other Muslims, she was not persecuted or tortured because of who she was. She came from an aristocratic family. Uqba was a rich, wealthy leader amongst the Quraysh. Even though he knew his daughter was Muslim, he let the people know, don't touch her, don't harm her, don't persecute her. So she was not persecuted like the other Muslims were, and that's why she stayed in Mecca. The other Muslims, when Allah sent the call for migration, they migrated the first time to Abyssinia. Then the second time, the rest of the Muslims migrated to Mecca. Well, she was one of the ones that stayed behind. To Medina. She did not go to Medina until the truce of Hudaybiyah. And that was a decisive day for her. Because when she heard of the conditions of the truce of the treaty of Hudaybiyah, that's when she realized that truce offered her the opportunity to finally migrate to Medina and join with the Prophet and the Muslims who had left before. So she stayed back in Mecca. It wasn't until the Treaty of Hudaybiyah that she decided to migrate. So with a heart full of faith and conviction, she left Mecca and set out towards Medina so she could join the Muslims there. And her struggle has been written by Ibn Saud. He says she was the first person to migrate to Medina after the Prophet Muhammad migrated. He says, we do not know of any other Muslim Qurayshi woman who left her parents' house and migrated to Allah and his messenger except her. She left Mecca alone and then joined up in the company of a man from the tribe of Khuzayah who helped guide her to Medina. So here's another woman just like Barakah. When we talked about Barakah, the woman who raised the Prophet left her back in Mecca because she was a spy. She did spying for the Muslims. Barakah traveled to Medina alone. Okay, well, Khulthum traveled alone too. Here's another woman that left alone, but Allah hooked her up with a man who was on his way there too, and he helped guide her to Medina. And as soon as she arrived in Medina, that's when Uqba sent her brothers. She had a brother named Amara and El-Walid. Her father, who was one of the leaders of the Quraysh, sent her brothers to go fetch her and bring her back, because part of that treaty of Hudaybiyah was that the Quraysh get to keep anybody who converts to this religion. So her two brothers arrived in Medina 2 days after she got there. And they went straight to the prophet and said, "Oh, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fulfill your obligation and return our sister back to us." Okay. Well, as they were arguing, Khulthum heard her brothers and she jumped in. This shows again, a voice is not order. She jumped in and interjected. She said, "O Prophet of Allah, I am a woman. And we women are not as strong physically as men." She said, "I am afraid that if you send me back to Mecca, they're going to try to take me away from Islam. And I can't bear not being a Muslim." In other words, she let the prophet know, "You let my brothers take me back, my father and them, they're going to try to force me. They're going to try to force me to leave my deen. And I couldn't live with that." And that's when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told her brothers, "No, I am not going to send her back." And that's when Allah sent down the verses of the Quran saying, "Oh, you who believe, when believing women come to you as immigrants, give them a test. Give them a test." And I'm going to tell you why this test came about. Because many of the people who converted to Islam then, just like today, were women. And these women had husbands. But unlike you numbskull Muslim women today, you convert to Islam and you stay shacking up with some kafir dog. And I have to say, that's what they are. They're kafir dogs. These women weren't like you. When they converted to Islam, they left their husbands. They left them. They couldn't stand the idea of a man touching them who did not believe la ilaha illallah. They could not stand the idea of a man touching them who didn't take a stinging after using the bathroom, who didn't wash himself after relations. So these women were not like you numbskull women today that rather lay in the bed with nasty, filthy, kafir degenerates. So this is why Allah sent down this verse saying, okay, give them a test. Give them a test to see if they sincere. If they're telling you they willing to leave their husbands, then you know that they for real, that this ain't no ploy by the Quraysh. So the question becomes, how did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam test the women? In particular, how did he test Khulthum to see if she was sincere? Because some of the other companions, they knew that she was the daughter of Uqba. And many of them were thinking, don't let her in because she might be a spy. Because, like I said, Baraka was staying behind doing some incognizance work. So they were thinking, well, maybe Uqba sent her to spy on us. So ask her some questions. So how did the Prophet know? What questions did he ask to see if her claim of belief was true? Well, Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with us, tells us. He said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked her and all the other women that came to embrace Islam, who left their husbands. He asked them, tell me, did you migrate because you don't like your husband? Did you migrate because you want to abandon your land and move to a new land? Did you migrate because of the life of this world? You want to get rich here in Medina? Or did you migrate because you love Allah and his messenger? So these were the questions that the Prophet asked all those women. All the women who left their husbands in Mecca, because she was the first. All the women who left their husbands in Mecca and came to Medina, these were the questions the Prophet asked to make sure. So there is no spying and that these women really were sincere. And once the women would swear by these answers, That's when and the person that asked the question was not the prophet either. The person that did the asking was Umar radiallahu anha. And once Umar asked the women these questions, if the women swore that they did it for the sake of Allah and the prophet, they did not send them back. But if any woman gave the wrong answer, saying, oh, I did it just because I don't like my husband, I don't like him, he's mean, then they wouldn't accept him. Y'all understand? So these were the questions that the prophet had Umar asked to any woman that left Mecca, abandoned her husband. Did you leave because you don't like your husband? Because remember, the men treated the women badly back then. Islam gave women rights. But before Islam, the Arabs treated their women badly. They were very oppressive. Okay. So Khulthum, may Allah be pleased with her, was asked those questions, and of course she passed. She was sincere. Plus Allah sent down the verses saying that he heard her complaints anyway. So the prophet knew she was sincere. Plus she was one of the early converts. Okay. And also Khulthum, once she got to Medina, she proved her allegiance. And she proved her allegiance over and over again. And the first time she proved her allegiance to Islam was on the day after the Battle of Badr. Her father, Uqba, was killed while he was a captive during the Battle of Badr. When brought forth for execution, nobody accepted any ransom for him because of his ill treatment of the Muslims. And when Khulthum heard that her father had been executed, she might have cried a few tears because that was her father, but his death did not affect her in regards to her belief in Allah. I mean, it's normal. You know, you hear that your father died. Oh, that's sad. But she knew her father was no good. She knew her father was an enemy of Allah, and it didn't faze her in that type of way. Because she did not migrate to escape an abusive husband. She did not migrate in search of money. She did not migrate to try to get rich in Medina. And she did not migrate to try to marry another man. Okay? Y'all understand that? And by the way, she was not married anyway. She was single. So that's another way that the prophet knew that she was sincere, because she had not been married. She was single. She was a virgin. And then the second time that she proved her devotion was after arriving in Medina. When she arrived in Medina, 4 men asked for her hand in marriage. Strangely, she ended up marrying them all. But when they all immediately asked to marry her, she didn't know which of the 4 to marry. So she went to her brother and asked her brother, whose name was Uthman, whose marriage proposal she should accept. And he told her to go ask the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So she went to the prophet and she said, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, I've never been married. And since I've come to Medina, 4 men want to marry me. Who should I marry?" The prophet said, "Marry Zayd." Now, y'all remember who Zayd was. Zayd was the Prophet Muhammad's ex-adopted son. Zayd was the one who ended up marrying Barakah, because originally he had married Zainab. Remember? Zayd had married Zainab. He was an ex-slave. Zainab didn't like him. He didn't like her because of her arrogance. She didn't like him because of his status. They ended up divorced a year later, and the prophet ended up marrying Zainab. And Zayd ended up marrying Barakah. Well, as you guys can see, the prophet wanted Zayd to take a second wife. He said, marry her. Marry Khulthum. Unlike Zainab, Khulthum accepted the offer. And again, why did the prophet want her to marry Zayd? Because Zayd was an ex-slave. Zayd was poor. Zayd was also very unattractive. And by the way, guys, according to history, Zayd was extremely short. And he was very, 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 very dark in color. And they say he had a snub nose. He had a funny shaped nose. So he was not attractive. Even though Zayd was half Arabic, he was not attractive. Short, something was wrong with his nose, and they say he just was not attractive at all. But even though she was a beautiful woman who came from a rich background, she agreed to the marriage. Unlike Zainab, she didn't have no problem with it. She was pleased to marry him. And this was her first marriage after her migration to Medina. She married to Zayd until he was killed in the Battle of Mu'tah. After the Battle of Mu'tah, when he was killed, she married Zubair. And you guys know who Zubair was. He was the man that was known for beating up on women. But he was a good companion, but he was known for being abusive to his wives. She married Zubair and she had a daughter from him, but she was very unhappy with him. Remember, Atika married Zubair too, but Atika put in her marriage contract that if he ever hit her, she's getting divorced. See how smart Atika was? Well, Khulthum didn't put that in her contract. She was very unhappy with Zubair because he was very mean and cruel towards his wife. So one day she asked him for a divorce. She begged him to divorce her, but he refused. So one day she caught him off guard. He was making wudu for prayer, and she began to pick an argument with him. She began to pester him, and to make him angry. And he got so angry, he told her, "I divorce you." There it is. This hadith is dalil too, that even anger, even if your husband gets mad and divorce you out of anger, it counts. So when he divorced her, she happened to be pregnant at the time. She was pregnant with their daughter. And right after he said, "I divorce you," she left the room and she went into labor. And she gave birth to their daughter, which immediately ended her waiting period. You guys know that when a man divorces a woman when she's pregnant, the divorce is not final until she gives birth. And he has to take her back before she gives birth. Well, that didn't happen here. She knew what she was doing. That's how unhappy she was in this marriage. She made him angry to the point where he divorced her, and she went right into labor, had the baby. And when he came out of making his prayer, he realized that she had the baby, and he said, "Oh my God, you tricked me. You tricked me. May Allah trick you." And they say Zubair ran to the prophet. He said, "Oh, prophet of Allah, she tricked me into divorcing her. I was making wudu and praying. She was pregnant. She knew she was in labor. She made me mad, and I said I divorce her." The prophet said, "The only thing I can tell you to do is to go to her and propose for her to marry you again." Zubair said, "She ain't gonna never take me back." And she didn't, of course. But see, that shows, she was a smart woman, because Zubair, even though he was an eminent companion, he was very cruel to his wives. Like I say, Atika was smart enough to put in her a contract that if he hit her, it's over. But for Khulthum, she was able to trick him this way. And so she was divorced from him. After she divorced him, she married her third husband, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, and she was happy with him because he was a good man. They had 6 children, and she stayed married to Abdul Rahman ibn Auf for 20 years until he died. And then after he died, she married Amir ibn al-As. And this is another example, you brothers that think that a woman, that's over the age of 30 or 40 is no good. She married Amir ibn al-As, but she died a month later. So she was happily married to everybody except for Zubair. The only woman that dealt with Zubair was Atika. Atika had this thing about her that no man ever abused her. Zubair never hit her either. Remember, he didn't hit on her because he didn't want to lose her. He ended, all that. Zubair ended up dying a martyr, as you all know. So when Umm Khulthum was married to Zubair, that's when he was also married to Atika. They were married at the same time. So Khulthum, she was happy with Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. They had 6 children. And then when he died, she married Amir ibn al-As, but she died a month after that. And basically, guys, that's the story. That's the story of Khulthum. That's all we have on her. Like I said, she was one of the first people to embrace Islam. She was the daughter of Uqba, but because of her, alhamdulillah, Allah sent down the verses saying that you cannot send a believing woman back to these kafir men. For these kafir men, to abuse. All right. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Are there any questions or comments on Khulthum Bint Uqba?
I had a question.
Yes.
I know the men, they had to send the men back for the treaty, but they didn't send the ladies back? Or was they just not sending any believers back?
Remember, that treaty was any people from Mecca that convert to Islam, anyone, male or female, if they come to Medina, you got to send them back. That was the treaty. Anyone that comes to Medina, send them back to us. But she was the first one to migrate from Mecca to Medina. And that stopped everything. That's when the treaty was broken after that. Yeah, because the prophet said we ain't sending them back. They ain't going back. So that was the end of that. Yeah, she was the first to come there over the men. No man came before her. She was the first. Like I said, she was the first to leave Mecca and migrate after the prophet. So there wasn't nobody to send back, because after this happened, that was it. The treaty was broken. They was back fighting again. Yep. But none of the men, like Mukhtar told y'all in his class, everybody that was left in Mecca were poor and were slaves, y'all. She wasn't a slave. She was rich. She was Uqba's daughter. She wanted to be with the prophet. She wanted to be with the Muslims. And there were some other women that converted to Islam too. But the men that were left back in Mecca were poor men. They were slaves. They couldn't migrate or do nothing because they didn't have no money. They didn't have no camels, no horses. They didn't have no clout. So none of them, the ones that were left in Mecca were unable to migrate. Yeah, except her, because she was wealthy. That's why she said she didn't want to be left back there with her brothers and, her father and all of them. She was not married, okay, but the other women were. And she let them know, if you send me back, my father, my brothers are going to try to make me apostate. She let them know the women are being abused back home. You got Muslim women who converted to Islam. Their husbands, you know, are abusive to them. And then you got me. I'm not married to nobody, but if you send me back with my brothers, they're going to beat me and try to force me to renege on my religion. That's what she was saying. Yeah. The first man she ever married was Zayd. Yeah, you understand?
Yeah, I had her confused because I remember the story, but I don't know if it was the I know it was a man, but that's when they had took him back. But I think it was during the time. I don't know if it was Abyssinia or what. I just kind of got it confused. It was kind of like the same similar story. So, but I just wanted to ask.
No, I think you think about somebody else. No, and this is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So she was the first one to come after, and that's when it, you know, the men that were left back in Mecca couldn't come nowhere anyway. They were slaves because all the other people migrated. They migrated before. The ones that didn't migrate before the prophet were, that weren't able to migrate were not in a position. They didn't have no power. A lot of slaves. Most of the people that converted to Islam were poor people, poor slave people that came from, lower backgrounds. The rich was Umar and them. They all left. Uthman, all of them had left. Abu Bakr was rich. Yeah. Amir ibn al-As and them were from Yemen. They weren't even from Mecca. They were from Yemen. These other companions came from Yemen. So anybody left in Mecca was poor, except that was a man. So they didn't come poor. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, guys, what I want y'all to do, tomorrow is Thursday. We're going to have Sheikh Saud here to do Quran interpretation and explanation. Let me play this little short so y'all can see. This is what we'll be expecting tomorrow with him, inshallah. Where is it at?
Assalamu alaikum. Sunnah Followers presents a new and exciting course to add to your Islamic learning and development. Interpretation in Living with the Quran, taught by Sheikh Saud Hassanin, considered to be one of the most accomplished scholars of Quranic science in the United States. He is a member of AMJA, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. He holds a PhD in Islamic Studies, professor at IUM. His specialty is in 10 different styles of Quranic recitation and jurisprudence. Classes will be held every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, streaming right here on Sunnah Followers.
Okay, so that's going to be tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I need to add that to the schedule. And also tomorrow you have my 6 o'clock class. And I don't want you guys to forget that we have the Call In and Ask Sister Layla live show on Friday. Any questions you guys have about Islam, make sure you bring them here so we can answer them on Friday, inshallah. And of course, the weekend is coming up with all of our fiqh classes with Dr. Ali and Dr. Jamali. And any dreams you have, don't forget the dream interpretation with Dr. Jamali. Do I have a thing for that? No, I don't have one for him on that. Geechee, did you make one up for the dreams for Dr. Jamali? I don't think so. Let me see. Hold on for a second. Did she?
No, I didn't make one. You didn't ask me to make one.
Do one for Jamali for dreams. I thought you did. You sure you didn't?
Nope. Just send me the information.
It's just on Saturdays at what time is his dream class, y'all?
At 8:07.
Wait a minute.
I think it's 8.
8? Yeah, at 8. No, it's not Saturdays. Is it Fridays? Y'all sure? Wait a minute.
No, his is Saturdays. Remember, you do your belief in the articles of belief after.
Oh, yeah, Saturday.
Wait a minute. Yeah, Saturday. Wait a minute. I'm frozen on here. I was
Yeah, you
uploading.
should.
I thought that you did one. I was sitting here trying to upload, and you didn't. Wait a minute. Hold on. Let me go back on Zoom and take that off. Because go back on this program, because I thought you had made one for him, and I was uploading this file, and ain't no need in uploading it if you didn't. Wait a minute, because there ain't gonna be no sound to it. Yeah, it's processing. So his is on Saturdays, y'all say? Yeah. Saturday at 9 p.m. Yeah, that's all you do. Just make your own information up. Saturdays at 9 p.m. But let the people know to come in and get on the mic. It'll be best if they get on the mic to tell their dreams so he can ask questions and stuff. Get their dreams interpreted. Yeah. Because that's going to be popular. I think that's going to be pretty popular here. Inshallah. Okay, guys, inshallah, I'm going to stop right here. Make sure everybody's here for the classes tomorrow. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.